everyone, I'm Lien and I'm so happy to be joining you again today on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. Today I have 3 different cards to share with you guys using only 2 stamps and a whole bunch of color. I needed 3 thank you cards. I wanted to send thank you cards to the people who bought my cards that I had up for auction for the Ukraine card drive. I will leave all the information about that below because it's a great cause and you can win some awesome cards, and they are definitely going to do another auction, so definitely check that out. Now, as you've seen on the pictures, I needed a bunch of these speech bubbles. This stamp is from the Love Story stamp set by Crafty Meraki, and I stamped it a bunch of times in Versamark ink. And now I'm going to sprinkle on embossing powder. This is Wow Bright White Superfine Embossing Powder. I also needed some in black, so you can see me repeatedly stamping this in VersaFine Onyx black ink. And you can see that I cut squares of cardstock, so I could just turn it and stamp it 4 times, and that saved me a bunch of time. I cut all of my cardstock squares the same size, and then I can add embossing powder to them all at the same time. And then I can heat set them all at the same time. So I haven't heat set the white embossed ones yet until I have stamped and sprinkled on the embossing powder for the black ones as well. So I can, this is how I mass produce things. I do every step all at the same time. Does that make sense? I did all of my stamping first, now I did all of my embossing, and I'm going to do all the coloring. So for one card, I wanted to use my Finetech metallic watercolor paints, but those work best on a black surface or a dark background. So I made sure to color in the hearts in black marker first. Then I'm adding some shading, some very minimal, very simple shading to the speech bubble there, just with some gray markers. I did that for all of the speech bubbles at the same time. This is the only card that I shaded the speech bubbles for. And then I can use my gold metallic paint by Finetech to paint in these hearts. Now it's worth pointing out that the line art for this is embossed, and I did work with some alcohol markers for this. So I had to be very careful about not touching the embossing powder too much or not touching the embossed line too much, because with my markers, I mean, because that's really bad for your markers and it also rubs away the embossing powder. So I didn't want that to happen because I really like that embossed outline. So I made sure not to touch it too much with my markers. Now I added gold paint to half of the hearts for this card, and then I added this blue teal paint for the other half of this card. And then I moved on to the second card, which has rainbow hearts in various shades. So I go from light to dark for each color family, and I just colored a flat wash is what you call it in watercolor, but I just colored these hearts in with 1 marker each, making sure to have a light one and then 2 medium tones and a dark one. So I could put them in order when I assembled my cards, but I didn't have enough markers to add shading to these with the markers. So I'm just going to use some colored pencils to add some shading to these hearts. I'm not making this too difficult because I have 24 hearts to color for each card, so I'm trying to keep things simple, but overall this took me a long time to make these cards. I think I spent 5 hours total on these 3 cards and matching envelopes, but that's just because I also fussy cut out the speech bubbles. If you have matching dies, I recommend you check out the video I will link in the description from Jennifer McGuire. She has amazing tips to mass produce die cut images, so stamped and die cut images. You die cut first and then you stamp on it. It's a whole thing. It's a really fun technique as well for mass producing, and I highly recommend you check that out. I had to fussy cut out all of these out afterwards. Now for my third card, I did some ink blending, emboss resist ink blending, so that's what I did with the white speech bubbles. I just used the Pink Fresh Studio inks, and these come in groups of 4 from light to dark, so those were perfect. Now putting these all on my card is going to be difficult, but I'm using a trick here. I lined up all of these speech bubbles first, so the ones you can see at the bottom, and then I put press and seal over that. And that is an amazing product that just keeps all of these speech bubbles in place. So I can put the next ones on top, so those are lined up perfectly as well. Press another layer of press and seal on top of those bubbles. Make sure you press them on, you press the press and seal really good on top of the bubbles, so they actually pull up again. You have to really press on it for it to work, because it's not really adhesive. I don't know how this works. It's just, it works. I did that for the third card as well, and then I left these all on the press and seal. I put one of these sets of bubbles on top of my white card that I need them to be on at the end. And then I arranged my sentiment there. I put that in my Misti so I know it's placed correctly, and that will be placed correctly for all 3 cards, because all of these 3 cards will have the same layout. The speech bubbles are just colored differently. So I can stamp this sentiment, which says, "You have an amazing heart," which I thought was perfect for a thank you card, especially for this occasion. And I stamped that in VersaFine Onyx Black. I stamped that for all 3 cards at the same time. And then I can emboss it for all 3 cards at the same time. I used WOW Clear Gloss Superfine Embossing Powder, and then I can heat set that as well once I have all 3 cards covered with embossing powder. And especially if you're doing heat embossing, it's important to do all your steps at the same time, or like do one step for all 3 cards at the same time, because then you only have to wait once for your heat tool to heat up. Now I am backing all of these white panels with a piece of cardboard, so they are nice and propped up and dimensional on my cards. And I am adding this silver ribbed cardstock on top of my card bases, just for a fun touch and a fun margin around that white propped up panel. I can then glue that panel down, and then the work really started, and that was cutting these pieces of foam tape to add to my speech bubbles. I added all of them at the same time, and then I peeled off all of the backings, and then I can just pick up that press and seal and press it all in place. Now, this was the messiest one. I don't know what happened, but I pulled up some speech bubbles along the way while adding the foam tape, so they were a little bit askew, and I just peeled them up from the card, made sure I didn't press them down too hard when I added them all at once with the press and seal, so I could pick them up again and move them around just a little bit to fix them a little bit. They're not aligned perfectly, but I think it still works. I did that for all of my cards. It's not super easy because the press and seal is fairly flimsy to add these to your card bases, but it does save a bunch of time if you want to prep up all of these speech bubbles and have them aligned somewhat decently. Now that almost finishes up the cards. I am going to add some final touches to them later, but I'm also making some matching envelopes, and I chose to go for blue because of the Ukraine flag. I'm going to add a gold or yellow accent to these envelopes. So I made 3 of the same envelopes, just folded them all at once with the We Are Memory Keepers 1, 2, 3 punch board. Then I'm gluing them all together, and then I'm stamping that same speech bubble stamp again in Versamark ink and adding WOW Gold Rich Pale embossing powder to that. That is a nice yellow embossing powder. It's not too yellow. I don't like yellow gold too much, but it does the trick. So this is the yellow and teal one for the Ukrainian flag. And then I have this rainbow one. And then I realized that I wanted to add a little bit more to these hearts. I like that they're shaded, but they're not shaded too well or too in depth. So I wanted to add a little bit of gloss to these, and I'm just using the Nouveau Glaze here. that adds a little bit of dimension to them and a whole lot of gloss and shine, which is lovely. To these ink blended speech bubbles, I am adding also some shimmer. This is the Wink of Stella glitter brush pen, and this will activate or reactivate the ink. So the hearts are slightly different color from the speech bubbles now, but I really like that. It sets them apart a little bit more. They all sparkle now. It's all really fun. I really love how these cards turned out. I was really honored to be able to donate some cards to the Ukraine card drive, and I hope you check out the next auction. They couldn't auction off all of the cards at once, so luckily for you, you still have a chance to get some amazing cards from amazing creators, and I hope you check it out in the description below. All of the products I used will also be linked there, and I hope you have a ton of fun crafting. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you leave a comment and a like, and I hope to see you next time.